Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel and join a club which is now more than 225,000 strong. I am joined by Jim Antle, who is Executive Editor of the Washington Examiner magazine. And Jim, we're talking on when the Congress is just about, it seems, to end the federal government shutdown, which has been of record length, 40 or 41 days, something of that sort. Mm-hmm. Not coincidentally, the Dems have caved, or at least dropped their opposition, however you want to look at it, to opening and financing the government immediately after they got their election boost from what I would regard as demagoguing it. Now, did they get anything else of substance from the deal, or was this purely an exercise to win election turnout?
Well, they didn't get any major policy concessions, which is pretty consistent with the history of using government shutdowns as a strategy to sort of force a president or force the other party to do something that it really doesn't want to do, that is a change in existing policy. I mean, they can argue that they got some of the federal workforce reductions that were done by the Trump administration during the shutdown reversed, which is certainly something. It's not nothing. Of course, it's something that would have been completely avoidable if they hadn't done the shutdown. And I think some Democrats hope that changing the conversation toward extending the Obamacare subsidies will give them a stronger hand next month when those subsidies expire. And it's a conversation that polls say doesn't necessarily benefit Republicans that much. But notably, they don't get the extension of those Obamacare subsidies, which at least ostensibly was the major reason for the shutdown.
Well, let's talk about the politics within the Democratic Party. There were 8 senators who decided to switch and vote with Republicans to finance the government and therefore obviously open it up. All of them, I think, are either not running again, or they're not running again in 2026, but in 2028. So none of them faces any real electoral pressure. At the same time, the 8 are being excoriated by the parties left, which wanted to see the government continue to be shut down until the Republicans caved on the Obamacare subsidies. Talk about is this a real civil war within the Democratic Party? And I mean, just for example, it was cited, I saw on TV recently in an interview, that Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire voted to flip and to vote, but her daughter is running for the House and is against the deal. So is this a real civil war, or is this mostly performative?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, certainly there was a subset of Senate Democrats that went along with the shutdown, but was never really super enthusiastic about it. And these tended to be centrist Democrats, institutionalist Democrats, and maybe even some Democrats who've been around for a while, knowing they've been around long enough to know that this was likely to be a performative act in and of itself. So there was a bit of a split as to whether the election results should give Democrats the off-ramp they need. Now they've shown that they were willing to fight President Trump. They fought him. Now holidays are coming up. SNAP benefits are in jeopardy. Federal workers are missing a lot of paychecks. Their own Senate staffers are missing paychecks. It's time to land the plane here, so to speak, both figuratively and literally, I suppose. But a much larger group of Democrats, who I think are at the moment winning the Civil War, simply want to show that they can fight Trump. And they were willing to keep the government shut down indefinitely. They felt that the election results validated their approach, that it supported the polling that suggested that more people, as improbably as it may seem, blamed Trump and the Republicans for the shutdown, probably because Trump and the Republicans are perceived as controlling every branch of government, which they do, but Democrats still have enough ranks in the Senate to mount a successful filibuster. So there were a lot of Democrats egged on by outside progressive activists who felt that the election results meant that they could push even further and that all the pressure was on Trump. Now, the reality is this wasn't going to be litigated again by the voters for another year. The shutdown was going to be long resolved by the time the midterm elections roll around. So the reality is the pressure kind of passed after the off-year elections were over. So even if they were right about the immediate politics of it, the medium-term politics of it for Trump and the Republicans really wasn't to give them any concessions at that point.
So let's talk about Chuck Schumer, because he is probably attracted more attention because of the shutdown in one way and another than anybody else. When the deal came up, I mean, he didn't vote for the deal.
Correct.
But he neither opposed it nor endorsed it.
Yes.
Now, for him, this shutdown was, it seems, almost entirely political and performative. He caved back in March and voted to finance the government. Questions arose about his leadership. People were furious. The left was furious with him. So there was no way he was going to vote for it this time. He kept them out. The Democrats had a great election day. He's come back. There's a sense that he never really wanted this to go he never really wanted the shutdown anyway. He certainly wasn't going to oppose it in the run-up to Thanksgiving. And not surprisingly, perhaps against his calculation, he's really gained almost nothing from this in acceptance by the left. The left is furious with him. There are people who are calling for his departure, his resignation as the leader, neither endorsing nor opposing the deal. Doesn't look like leadership. He's being mocked by Colbert, amongst others, on TV. Is he going to survive this, or are his days numbered?
His days are certainly numbered. Whether he survives this in the immediate term, he might be able to do that, but his leadership keeps getting progressively weakened. And yes, it looks like he either tacitly supported this deal while voting against it, but supported it behind the scenes. Many people are skeptical that Dick Durbin would have played the role in it that he did without Schumer's blessing, and Durbin has the benefit of not seeking re-election. The election results themselves, with the election of Mamdani in New York, with sort of the elevation of AOC as somebody who could potentially primary Schumer, now looking like a bit of a kingmaker in New York politics. She was obviously an early supporter of the new mayor of New York City, the incoming mayor. Schumer never endorsed Mamdani. So the shutdown, and of course, obviously, the fact that he opposed the shutdown months ago cast doubt on his sincerity supporting it this time around. And then even if he wasn't involved, it still shows that he was unable to keep the caucus unified behind the whole shutdown strategy. So he really sort of looks like a weak link. And now with the retirement of Nancy Pelosi, he's really the last of the old guard. He was already the last of the old guard still in his leadership position. But now he's the last of these people who's still going to be around on Capitol Hill. And with a Democratic base that is hungry to move on from the establishment, it's hard to see this working out long term for Schumer.
Let's switch from, as it were, the personalities or the people and the politics, but let's turn briefly to policy, because the shutdown, given that the Democrats were saying, we're shutting down the federal government until you extend subsidies on Obamacare, it's focused attention, public attention, on healthcare and on Obamacare. And I think it always needs to be said to remind people when we're thinking about this shutdown that the subsidies that the Democrats wanted extended were emergency COVID subsidies. And the Biden administration declared the emergency over in 2022. The subsidies were voted in by the Democrats alone through 2025, and every single Democrat, when they voted for it, voted for them to expire at the end of 2025. So this expiration is not the dastardly Republicans imposing something and raising people's health care. It's the law playing out. it seems to me that what we're looking at here is a desperate or angry attempt by the Democrats to force the subsidies, which were supposed to be temporary, were supposed to be emergency, because without those subsidies, it exposes the fact that the Obamacare, which was officially called the Affordable Care Act, never made health care affordable. And what we're seeing is fast rising health insurance premiums. So isn't this really largely about the Democrats trying to conceal that their signature legislation of the past generation was a flop and didn't work?
Absolutely, and it was passed, both Obamacare itself and these particular subsidies were repeatedly enacted through partisan processes that were designed to minimize and exclude Republican involvement from the process of designing this law. So it is a Democratic failure, but it has the benefit of a lot of the types of things that Democrats do, in that it creates something that people depend on,
right,
even if it doesn't work very well. And Republicans lacking a viable alternative then are made to either allow the Democrats' handiwork to implode while people are dependent on it,
right,
or they have to keep piling on subsidy after subsidy and mandate after mandate on this mess of a law to keep it functioning at some basic level and prevent some level of voter disapproval. So it's a terrible system. Mm-hmm. Democrats now campaign against the healthcare system as if Obamacare never existed in the first place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, you have people shooting healthcare executives in the street. Well, this was happening under Obamacare,
right,
which is itself a massive subsidy to the health insurance industry. Clearly didn't really solve a lot of underlying problems, but they still have this trap where they could just keep growing and growing
right,
the government's role in healthcare.
Of course, it has focused attention on the need to, again, reform healthcare 15
right,
years after Obamacare was passed. And it's important for the Republicans to come up with their own alternative. But let's switch away from that and look at another, and away from Democrat problems. We've kind of transitioned to Republican problems. The election and the Democrats' success in the last election has focused attention on affordability, as it's now being called, which is basically prices.
Right.
Even though inflation is running at 3% compared to the 9% peak that it was during the Biden administration, nevertheless, it's cumulative. Things are more expensive now than they were a year ago. Prices have risen under President Trump. Now, in an interview just in the last 24 hours, President Trump has described the affordability issue as a non-issue. Mm-hmm. Isn't he making precisely the same mistake that the Biden administration and President Biden made several years ago when they tried to gaslight the voters and tell them this isn't really a problem. This is it's to do with the war in Ukraine. It's to do with this. It's to do with that. It's not real. Actually, the economy is terrific. You can't persuade people who are feeling prices go up each week at the grocery store that they're not seeing something real. Isn't this a big mistake for Trump to just say, oh, actually, it's not an issue?
It's a huge mistake, and I think some of the administration's own behavior indicates that they realize affordability is a problem. But in addition to the gaslighting aspect, the mistake of President Biden's that President Trump is repeating right now is a defensiveness about the economy and
right,
a defensiveness about his economic stewardship. And to some extent, he might be right that there are various economic metrics that are favorable and for which he arguably deserves some credit, and he'd like to see the party do more to amplify that message. But the plain fact is that the high cost of living is the metric that a lot of voters are looking at right now, mm-hmm, and that metric, while there are areas in which it has improved, has simply not snapped back to circa 2019, which is what a number of Trump voters I think, were hoping for when they cast their ballots for him. I mean, the big problem with inflation and cost of living issues in general is, as you say, that they're cumulative. So if you have a recession, recession ends, the economy grows, unemployment goes down, people go back to work, assuming they get jobs with comparable pay to what they had before, life goes back to normal.
Right.
With inflation, it's not like that. Inflation may come back down to a manageable level. It might come back down to the Fed's preferred rate at some point. But that doesn't mean prices are going to go back down to where they were in 2019 or at any point before inflation was running at a 41-year high. And that is a very difficult thing to manage.
Yeah. So it's something that Trump really needs to get right in the next 12 months because the indications from the election just gone, which was just an off-year election, is that there's it was a real damn landslide. And if there is a similar kind of swing to the Democrats in the 2026 elections, they're obviously going to take the House. I suppose conceivably they will take the Senate as well. But if they take the House, can we assume that Trump is going to get impeached again? And also talk about the fact that if they take the House, it will be possible for the Democrats to derail or hobble the administration just as they did in the first administration. They will be able to stop the agenda because they oppose everything that Trump does.
Right. I mean, even if they don't impeach him again, and I think the pressure from the left-wing base will be irresistible for them to at least consider impeaching him again. And if there's any scandals, which inevitably there will be, that would provide impeachment fodder, it gets even harder to fight that off. But even if they don't impeach him, the fact would be, at that point, his presidency would be legislatively over.
Right.
He really wouldn't be able to pass any meaningful legislation from that point on. He particularly will be handicapped on tax and spending legislation, which have to originate in the House constitutionally. And so he really would be limited to executive orders, which have a limited impact and can often be just messaging, and foreign policy, which, if the economy and domestic issues are still a problem, which they would seem to be if Democrats do retake the House, it would give him very limited avenues to address them. I mean, foreign policy, even if he's very successful as a foreign policy president by the end of his term, as George H.W. Bush demonstrated, that doesn't necessarily help you if voters are concerned about the economy.
Right. Well, Jim, we'll leave it there, and thanks very much indeed for joining me here on Political Perspectives. We'll be coming back, obviously, to these issues again, and I invite you all to join us again on Political Perspectives next time. Remember, if you're joining us on YouTube, like and subscribe to our fast-growing channel. Thanks very much.